All right, we are on, fellas. Hello, general hello to everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Excellent. I'm a 10. What about you fellas?
7 out of 10.
Well, you're obviously a 10, Kirk. That's why you were
Oh,
picked for The Bachelor.
start.
There's a dime.
How about you, Rich? How you doing?
I'd say 8.5. I'm good today. I feel
Awesome.
great. I'm feeling great. So we are here today. We're going to talk about a little bit of the Savage series that just went down. We just finished up the inaugural Savage series. Ryan Kempson ended up on top. Chris Rogloski ended up on top as well. I didn't catch the coverage. Bracken, did you guys? You guys went live to tape. It's out now.
Yeah, live to tape. It's out today. It just didn't feel like the pipeline wasn't smooth with getting it from live over to the editing studio. So there was a bit of a delay there, and it cost us.
I think it's okay to have it live to tape.
Live to tape, yes, but it could have been out the next morning.
Oh,
I mean, with
see.
what we're doing, it could be out the same day.
That's
but
true.
there wasn't any didn't feel like the heat was on their end. Like, we got to get this out.
I will say camera turned out good. I watched it last night. It's such a better product with the clarity and not having to worry about connectivity issues. It really did come in crisp. There were a couple times where Matt and you said something and then it would appear 2 seconds before you guys actually said, and it was like, oh wait, there's a little bit of an editing issue there in terms of the timeline, but overall I thought it was a good product.
I can't help but feel that there's a bit of a refractory period after races where everyone's like, yeah, we'll do this tape delay thing. It'll be awesome. People will hang in there. And then the second the finale, the climax of the race happens, everyone's like, whatever. We know the results. When it comes out, it comes out. And then there's it cools their jets a little bit, and it's never quite as exciting when the race hits. So I love the final footage, but I really wish there was a way to piece that together into day of action without it being a $50,000 production.
I mean, I think I agree, and I haven't watched it, and I'm not in a rush to watch it because I do know the results, and it is a phenomenon that happens. Even if I'm 5 minutes behind in a sporting event that I'm watching, texting my friends with, I try to get live as fast as I can, just because I want to know when it happens, even though if it's not happened in my head yet. But from a marketing perspective and just a visual presentation for the sport, it's probably better for people who are going to find it later than what it has been in the past.
Have you gone back and looked at the views even on the Spartan coverage? I mean, you go back to the live broadcasts that were aired live and they were getting 500,000 to 1 million views. And then you go back to these high-end edits that are released a week and a half later and they have 4,000 views.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even in the same ballpark, which is unfortunate, but it just goes to show the buy-in from the audience if it's live versus if it's not. Check it out on YouTube. You'd be shocked at the number differences.
I thought that a lot of those were on Facebook Live and people would, tune in for 4 minutes being like, what the heck is this? They comment that and then disappear, but that kind of is a view.
I have no idea, but still a lot.
Yeah.
It's still a lot more back in the day.
Well, and your audience will give some grace with what product they're getting. If I'm watching live and it's jumping from male to female, it's it's kind of frustrating, but okay, I'll take it because I'm getting what's happening in the race. But the post-production delay, now I expect to see everything. And it's hard for me to get a chopped up, and I'm not saying that's what Savages is, but it's also clearly not the full race. So I want one. I mean, I really want both. I want to be able to watch whatever I can get in real time and get a sense of it in the moment. But then later on, I want the full shebang.
Yeah, but we'll talk about it as much as we can for that perspective. And it's a work in progress. And Bracken, you're doing great. Still to this day, I think the best thing I've ever seen of a compliment was someone who wrote on a High Rocks coverage that I don't care much for High Rocks, but I just like to hear Bracken speak.
It's probably my mom.
It's definitely your aunt or something.
There's just no money in this sport. That's the issue. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, this is a broke ass sport when we really look at it. And so how do you advocate dollars to go into quick turnaround and high end content when we're just scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? And then every year, sponsors are maybe not renewed. If you look on some of the ends, it's new sponsors every year, so there's no guaranteed income coming in. And how are they going to? It's just kind of what do you expect, right? What do you expect?
Well, I have an interesting take on this that hurts my cause. And I
Okay.
think my take is that once you delay production to not being live, commentary doesn't matter anymore. And I think we're approaching it from a commentary perspective. Like, how can we get these guys on mic talking about the race, explaining it? The race is going to explain itself. When it's live, it's really interesting because people are interested in what's going to happen and why is that happening. But after the fact, when you know the results and it's just pieced together, I think the commentary actually matters less. Does that make sense? And I sometimes feel like we're attacking it from the wrong perspective, where I think the money should be put into, if there even is money, what Jack proved in Slow is good rabbits that can just run the entire time, because every time you don't have to switch from cam to cam, or even for post-production, if you can get one person that can run for the entirety of the race and just not have to do the obstacles and can run that pace, that's going to be the best footage you're ever going to get. And I think that we don't highlight how we get the footage. We're highlighting how we talk about it, which to me is immaterial at this point because it's not a complicated sport.
That's interesting to think about it that way.
Do you sort of see it? You know how like after an NBA game or NFL, they'll have like the game in 10 minutes and they'll put it up like 45 minutes after the game. And you don't have all the, just the background talk from the announcers filling in, giving the color play by play. It's just hike, do the play, 10 seconds later, cut. You never really get that conversation going on in the booth. Is that kind of
it rings hollow when it happens? Like, what happened and you're pretending like you don't know, or you're trying to sound like you know more than you know. So when we do it, we have to like stay off social media. So I don't know. My point is, I would rather rabbit the entire women's race or the men's race if it's not at altitude, because I think I could run with the entire men's field if I didn't have to do the obstacles. It's like an interval workout. Yeah. And then just do the Jack Bauer style of when I see something, I say it. I'd rather do that coverage than give a 20-minute, like, just like hyphenate, not even hyphen, just like a concentrated after the fact 20-minute thing where I try to sound like I know what I'm talking about. I'd rather just show the whole race.
Oh, you guys cut the coverage, so it's not you talking in stream, like just how you would if you were watching the race live?
It is, but it's jumping from, like, they're starting up the hill. Now they're going over a wall. We don't know what distance in it is. And
that's what Decca's been doing, right, Jack? Where they and that is not good. So I think you should just watch it and commentate it for the hour that it runs, because the explanation is important. And when Jackie brought up football, the football commentators are there to tell you what has happened and what might happen next. When it's just cut play by play, like there's no room for that. It's not enough time. But if you give the full hour to explain like what's going on through the race, I think that is helpful.
The way that I see it, like a lot of people, they're like, oh, people have shorter and shorter attention spans. We just need to cut it down. Even if you have a 20-minute broadcast that you're cutting everything down, people still know what they're getting themselves into. It's not like you just quickly flip into the next page. Like 20 minutes, that's a commitment to watch that type of video. You might as well show the whole 30 to 40-minute race in its entirety. So you can at least have the storyline and you don't have these random gaps, because you see that in the Olympics and other sports. Like, isn't it frustrating when, the 10K is on TV and they're like, we're going to go to a commercial break, and then suddenly there's a breakaway pack and you're like, that would have been nice to have seen. Like, you could have just aired the whole thing.
So let's talk about, so this got me thinking a little bit about, because after every championship, every series, there's going to be the question of legacy then. Like, what does this mean long-term? What does this mean for the athletes who are involved in that? And I think in terms of Chris, we talk about her too much anyway. She's still ascending. It's hard to even project where she is in terms of how she stacks up all time on this. But Kempson, who's been in the game quite a bit and has established a lot over his career, it got me thinking, like, where is he in terms of all-time OCR athletes? And I think we have an idea of who maybe like the top 3 to 5 are, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of run down and kind of see where he kind of stacks up. So there's a couple of things that I think we should consider when making lists like this, or figuring out where someone is in terms of like the legacy that they are leaving. So Bracken, when you are like considering these type of factors, like what does come into play, like in terms of like accomplishments or longevity, or like what kind of things are you thinking about first to then like order these athletes out?
I think greatness in an individual sport is a different than in a team sport. And that's not like this great revelation, but one of my pet peeves about team sports is that they overemphasize the importance of championships, or so-and-so never won a championship. It's like, well, their organization never surrounded them with players. I don't think you can judge that, but in our sport, you do have to judge it. And that's actually where I have a tier 1 all-time greatest and tier 2 and 3. In tier 1 are multiple time world champions. And it's non-negotiable in my mind. I think you also have to look on the impact on your era. Like when you were there, are you just always taking up someone's spot? Like the ability to show up consistently. Like Ryan Atkins is in tier 1 for me, despite being a single time Spartan world champion. Because it's just as hard. What'd you say?
Do you ignore WTM then?
No, single time Spartan world champion.
Okay. Gotcha.
He's won other championships, but it's even harder to take second 4 years in a row than it is to win once. So I think consistency over time, body of work, impact on your races and on your era in championships absolutely matter. There are guys who scoot into third place from time to time, and there are guys who show up and everyone's like, well, one of the top 3 is gone.
So that's an interesting point there. And Kurt, would you say that the championships matter? Because that's something that Jack kind of brought up too. It's like, oh, is it just Spartan? Or how do you weigh out something like a World's Toughest or a Spartan Ultra or an OCR World Championships? Like, do you like kind of have them in any kind of order of importance?
Yeah, definitely. And I try to take my own personal bias out of it. I think, over time, the density of field has exclusively been Spartan. It's starting to shift towards Savage Race, which is fantastic to see. And then you look at like something like WTM, and it's hard not to differentiate that from like traditional OCR because it's a 24-hour race. And then we're in like a whole other subculture of OCR, which is really ultra running. And so Spartan absolutely is number 1 for me. We just don't see the big championships, the big following, and anything else. And although some can argue that Spartan has gotten soft or there's better circuits out there, which there may be, all our minds go right to the Spartan results. Let's be honest. Like we can factor in the other things, like what Kempson done this season is very impressive. And it also backs up the foundation of what he's already laid in Spartan race. But if it wasn't for Spartan, I don't think we could even be having this conversation about Kempson. So in my opinion, unfortunately, Spartan is sort of centerpiece.
Let me just add, he won OCR Worlds last year, Kirk. So
yeah, good point. Yep.
But and Kirk, you're right, because if he hadn't been in Spartan doing that, he would be Yuri Force.
Right.
That's what Yuri did for years.
How often do we talk about Yuri Force?
I feel like you and I, because I love talking about Yuri Force. But outside of that, everyone just agrees he's the most underrated ever, but we can't really tell because he only dabbled in Spartan a few times, and he usually gets smoked because they're usually mountain courses.
But the one thing about Yuri to me that I'm just like I can't really get past is when he goes to OCR World Championships and is in the age group competition. It's like
yeah, but that
was
like
he can't be he can't be underrated if he just doesn't feel he's at that level. It's like
never lost.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do age group, I mean, I could never lose an age group.
Kowalski did it. Also,
did he?
Yeah.
All right. He's dropped down from my legacy list then. Sorry, Brian. That's my guy, though.
So, I mean, short story for me, accomplishments do matter in individual sports. Your wins, your percentage of podium hits, your consistency over time. Some athletes, we don't have a body of work to say, like a Chris, to say consistency over time, yet I already have her in the Hall of Fame. So there are some people that like flash in the pan currently doesn't look like a flash in the pan because it's all we know for the last 2 years is how good they are. And there are people that make the Hall really early.
Where would the OCR Hall of Fame be?
That's the question. Do
Killington?
You just give it to Joe?
He just carries it around? Yeah. Sorry, Jack, I cut you off.
But isn't that case in point? Again, your mind just said Killington right off the bat, and Killington is synonymous with Spartan,
or whatever.
where the competition is. It's just, so for better or worse, and people can roll their eyes at it, it still is the pinnacle of competition in our sport. So.
That's why it's popular.
Yeah.
Joe had his way. He'd put it at the top of the death march in Killington so that to see it, you had to suffer. That's where he would put it, right at the top.
You have to dig a hole first.
And by the way,
go
we're
underneath.
paving the yard, so here's a flagstone you got to carry up there with you to get in. Then you don't have to pay.
I do have a question. So Kempson kind of, not a rough start, but he was not Kempson at the beginning of his career. Do you take away the fact that he had to kind of build his way up? He really only started having major race success in 2019, but he started racing in 2014 and was just kind of, mid-pack at national series races. He couldn't figure out his nutrition. He had some injuries that he was dealing with, obviously. So those are valid excuses for like why he had some issues there before he had his breakthrough. But would you say that like a NBA or a NFL player who had first 5 years, they just couldn't figure it out, and then they suddenly did well?
Jimmy Butler?
Yeah, Kurt Warner's he's a Hall of Famer. He's a 3-time MVP, 2-time.
Yeah,
but he couldn't even catch on for a couple of years. He's starting to wash out of Arena League. Not wash out, but starting to be done with that. So it's a valid point, but I think it's more about what you do rather than how long it took to get there.
Yeah.
I think it adds to his legacy because he didn't
agree.
come in here and just kick ass right away. It took him some time and he figured it out and he built himself up over time. I like that the most about Kempson. When I put this list together, I was like, he's kind of stands out in that field that he had the perseverance to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and anyone who didn't race against Albin or Cody shares the same one knock against their legacy, which is that they're just fantastic mountain runners, but they're really never that good at obstacles, which is categorically false. Cody Moat was third at OCR World Championships, and John Albin is probably one of the most efficient obstaclers we've ever seen in the world, and he just doesn't take risks on them because he's already winning. But the point is, that's one of the big knocks is they just came in, they're super talented runners. And because Spartan didn't reward obstacles, they could just run away with it because it's a runner's race. Where Kempson clearly didn't come in as a 13-minute 5K. He didn't have that big like stick to swing on course. He just had to craft himself into what he is. So I think it's like you said, Rich, I think it strengthens his legacy.
And to add to that, I mean, his trajectory improved when the density of field got immensely more stout. So not only that, but he's actually reverse trending. Like, let's say Bracken Crocker was as good as he was back in the day. He remains as good as he was today. And now he's 10th instead of second or third. And Kempson's just gone against the grain in that regard. So I agree. If you know the sport and you follow the trajectory, I would say what he has done, I can't think of anybody else that's done it. Maybe a Woodsy, but that was only because of obstacle failure, not overall fitness and run improvement. So,
and BJ because of puberty.
Touche.
But no, you're right. Kempson is the exception to the rule. He and I, you're right. We passed each other in Jacksonville one year, or in Miami, where I'd seen him 8 months earlier. And then he dropped back after 2 miles. And this time I saw his back, as we trended opposite directions. He's defying the trend of this sport.
Your X crossed right in the middle.
Apply demand curve right there.
So looking at the races then, or the accomplishments, I kind of took some time to kind of rank them just so when we are talking about like the different accomplishments that the athletes have, like how then to kind of settle it. So I think a Spartan World Championship is kind of the pinnacle, as Kirk was saying. What do you guys put right under that? Like in terms of, is it OCR World Championships? Is it an ultra? Is it a toughest mudder? Like what's the second best accomplishment you can have?
I think it's so tough because last year OCR Worlds, nothing against BJ winning 3K or Lindsay, because they easily could have won those regardless of who from the international field showed up. But last year was a little weird because it was the same day as Tahoe and a lot of Europeans couldn't travel over. So I feel like there's a little bit of an asterisk to some people for last year's title, and that just happens to be the one that Ryan Kempson won. But I would say in terms of prestige, Spartan Race World Championship followed probably by the 15K, then the 3K. Those are probably the top three.
And we have to include those because we're talking all time. We're talking worldwide here, I suppose. We get narrow scoped over here in the States, but as we know, when you go across seas or in different countries, the North American contingency becomes less impressive. And I know we're probably not going to include a lot of overseas humans in this because we're very self-consumed and narcissistic when it comes to our OCR. However, that's where that one just has to factor in, right? Like, how does everybody stack up against the world? And ideally, the entire world's able to show up for that race. So you'd like to say North American champs. You'd like to say who is the U.S. National Series champ at the end of the whole deal. But you got to go OCRWC. Yeah. You just have to.
Yeah.
And I have a bit of a U.S. centric ranking. It's going to be disrespectful, but I put Spartan Race head and shoulders above any other competition on earth because of the depth of field. Mm-hmm. And then I put the North American Championships on par with OCR World Championships, somewhere in between the 15K and the 3K. The average of those two is North American Championships to me.
For Spartan
North American Championships.
For West Virginia, basically.
Yeah, sits in between OCR World 15K and OCR World 3K. And then underneath that, I have tied with North American Series Championships, Ultra World Championships, right under that, Stadium Championships, European Championships, any of the things that are kind of the
minor
oddball
series.
Events. Yeah, minor series or minor championships, they're all underneath. Like winning a stadium series is not the same as winning a North American series. Winning a Spartans 24-hour race to me is not as impressive as winning world's toughest because of who shows up. So my ranking will anger a lot of people.
Ruffle those feathers, Bracken.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're saying that a North American Spartan and the OCR World Championships are kind of in the same tier, and then under that, it's like the 24-hour races and like the sub series and any international Spartan series.
Yeah, now Spartan Euros I put just below OCR Worlds actually, and just probably equal with the North American Championship or with a series, because that is a very difficult race to win, but it sits just below because they don't always get everyone there.
Those races are so stacked.
Some years, but some years they're not, and you can never say that about the other two I mentioned.
I mean, how many have there been? There've been 2 West Virginias that actually were the North American Championship, and then Tahoe, which was the same weekend as OCR Worlds, where half the field showed up. And then
that Tahoe year would be like an outlier, and I would actually weigh that less. Yeah.
Yeah, but with Europeans, you've had Sergey, who just got second at World Championship. He won it one year. Albin's won it a couple times, like Peter Ziska, Zuzana multiple times. You have some pretty ridiculous competition there. And as we've seen, the Europeans are the real deal. Where would you put Greece Trifecta World Championships?
I put that with a stadium series.
But really, that low?
Yeah, because it's that much of an oddball event.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one trains for it, and so many weird things can happen. Maybe I put it with OCR World's 3K, where you could throw the same 20 guys at it, and there's probably 7 or 8 who will win, and it'll shift every time you run the simulation. Because so many in a 3K, so many things can happen. In the trifecta weekend, so many things. You think Richard Heineck wins that 10 times out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or even 3 out of 10?
No.
You think if you give them all 6 more weeks to prepare, it's the same result? Yeah. And I think you'd see the same thing with the short events and those oddballs. So it's one of those where if someone like Atkins or Albin wins it, it adds to their resume. And if someone doesn't, I kind of discard it because they wouldn't win again.
The Trifecta World Champ results, anybody that does well there has already proven themselves in one of the other things we've already mentioned. It's just sort of like a little icing on somebody's cake if they've proven themselves in another race or series. But I don't think if you go and show up and for some reason crush it, it doesn't automatically bump you up to the top 10 list of all time. Yeah.
Heineck is tier 3 for me all time, with or without that. He just moves up his ranking in tier 3 with it. It's probably the shiniest thing on his resume, but it doesn't make his resume.
Mm-hmm. How much are we going to layer in national series or even regional podiums? Like national series podiums, I think should be up here for sure. They're not easy to get. Like Bracken, what you were saying before, that there's going to be these greats who do show up, who take a spot. And then after that, there's only a couple spots left. How do you guys feel about things like those, like big regional races factoring into this type of conversation?
I think they matter when they matter, and they don't when they don't. So if someone doesn't have much else on their resume, but they've snagged 2 or 3 national series podiums, I don't think it moves them up to tier 2. But if it's someone who, let's say Atkins versus who else could be tier 1? Maybe Ryan
Albin.
Kent. They both have world championships, but not necessarily at the big ones. Atkins is far ahead of Kent because he is podium like every single national series ever. But then again, if you put in Kent versus, let's say, I don't know, let's just say me.
Yeah.
If we have a similar head-to-head record, he's far ahead of me in lifelong ranking because he's won a national series race and he's taken second in a couple. Like, I think they matter when they support your cause, but they can't make your cause.
They're down the list of arguments. Like, there's things that are going to trump them, but if it comes down to, like,
to me,
picking nits, I agree. I think that's fair.
But
that's fair.
So is podium the thing that matters? Because as you kind of alluded to earlier, I know Kirk mentioned that Bracken's second and third back in the day might be 10th now. Isn't it quality of performance? Do you care more about that, or you're like, oh, you weren't top 3, doesn't matter that Nick outsprinted Hawk in the last 4 seconds of a race that he was mainly losing? The fact that he got the podium in slow is more meaningful, like, than a 4th place, very, very similar caliber race.
I don't think you can play retrospective, do math like that. Like Robert Griffin III, to use an NFL analogy. Had he come into the league when Randall Cunningham did, could he have been the greatest scrambling quarterback of all time? Probably. Yeah. Was he like 9th best of our generation? Yeah, but like we can't say, well, we know you would have been the best. So let's, like, Tyler Veerman, you probably would have won 5 events 10 years ago. So
you can't compare eras.
Yeah,
compare eras.
I'm saying, is 3 the cutoff that you look at? You're like, oh, 4th or worst, it doesn't matter.
Like you're saying, if you look at like the list of,
if you have a spreadsheet and you're doing a checklist, you're like, oh, here's how many 3rd place are better in big races. As
hypothetically, if you have a spreadsheet, yeah. It's just that's too in the weeds. I think that would have to be like a supplemental argument for even beyond, like, the podiums. I think
I'm mainly arguing, are we just like, do people only care about Olympic style? Like, it's like you either podiumed or you didn't. That seems to be the consensus.
I think the bigger the race, the more spots matter. Let's say you were looking at Albert Soleil, for example.
Yeah.
If he goes top 10 at Spartan Worlds, 7th, 9th, that would strengthen his case. Whereas, let's say Glenn Race taking 9th, it doesn't do anything for his case because he wasn't in the conversation to start with. As much as I love Glenn, he and I aren't in the conversation to start with, even though we've both had top 10 at Worlds. It doesn't make our case. Well, but someone who can go top 10 in multiple different formats, World Championship, it probably helps their case.
Bracken, right? Here's a perfect example. You got 3rd at Spartan World Championship once, and there are several
twice,
people.
But who's counting?
Oh, if you're doubling the altar, yeah. So in a standard championship, but you probably wouldn't say, like, Woods has never podiumed at Spartan Race World Championship. No. I think you got 4th one year as his best. Like, does your 3rd matter more than his 4th, even though he might have, it wasn't in 2012 when the competition wasn't as good?
I say yes.
If we were looking at ourselves with faceless headings and I said 2/3 in 2012 versus his 4th in 2016, I'd say mine wins. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is that's not our whole resume. He then gets to point at 15 national series podiums and multiple top 10s, and mine are lacking there, and he clearly trumps me. So if it came down to those were the only 2 metrics that matter, that would be a undecidable debate, even though I think we all agree his performance was better than mine, but luckily we don't have to debate that because no one's arguing that I'm better than Woods at Spartan Race.
Not to pivot too much here, but hybrid racing in the recent few years, are we including or excluding here? There's one man or two in particular in which their resume is super beefed up by the emergence of hybrid racing and women as well. Or is that off the table? And how can you not let that influence your decision regardless?
I mean, I think if you once had the world championship in like a deca mile, it should matter. So I'm for it.
Top 10.
Like, you got to factor it in.
I draw the line between obstacles and stations.
Tasks versus obstacles, in a sense.
Yeah, and if there are only tasks, then that's CrossFit. That's it's anything else. So to me, Deca and High Rocks are their own thing. However, just like smaller races, I think it can strengthen your case. So like it takes a Hunter and a Kent, and to me, it cements them in the archives of the greatest. For someone who only does like a Dylan Scott, I don't think so, because we haven't seen OCR from him yet. Mm-hmm. So if you can do both, it strengthens your case, but I don't think you can make the Hall of Fame off only high rocks.
Rich, do you want to argue you want to argue any sort of case here?
Because I don't think that's necessarily right. That's just my opinion.
I think I had this written down, like multiple disciplines. Like, is that something that can strengthen a case? And I think if we're looking at that and we need to beef up a resume, I do think it should be talked about, just based on like what kind of athlete they are, telling them their whole story. But yeah, if it's just like,
so where do we draw the line?
Well, here's can I just interject real quick? Run. But here's the thing. We sat here and you said already, well, Chris Rogloski is in my top 10 of all time. But if she doesn't win the High Rocks World Champs, you can't put her in there. No freaking way. But you chose to because of that on her resume. So to say we can exclude hybrid racing, that's part of your decision making, right? You can't build her to be one of the top 10 greatest of all time based on a second place and a third place, right? So like there is some like we're letting this bleed into our decision make, right?
I think it can be part of it, but you could be the greatest of all time or in the conversation with only doing Spartan race or only doing OCR Worlds, or maybe even only doing World's Toughest Mudder. I think there's a few people on the list that might be ultra specialists, but I don't think you can be tier one off only doing hybrid racing. So I think it has to be part of the conversation, but it can't be its own like deciding factor. Does that make sense?
I agree with that completely. I just think like there's like you're right. Like this one person who's absolutely blowing everybody's minds right now. Like I don't think she's in the top 10 because it's too early without that High Rocks World Champs. Mm-hmm. Yet now we're like, do we put her in there? But it's because of that.
And she had an OCR Worlds podium within the last 7 months.
That's true. Yep.
So just to go back to the station thing that you were just discussing a second ago, does TMX, Tough Mudder X, does that influence things? Because that had obstacles and stations.
Had more obstacles than stations.
But
sure.
Okay, so someone like Corinna or Hunter who won a world championship, and that is a valid argument for them.
Yes, and luckily they both have podiums at World Championships Spartan to beef it up, so it strengthens theirs. But like, I don't know who else did really well there, but has never done well in OCR.
All the CrossFitters.
I think we're just in a moment, and we're just in a moment in time where the two are starting to splinter, and in 4 or 5 years there's not going to be this crossover between the two. It's going to be like hybrid's going to be its own thing, and we can have this conversation about the hybrid greats, and OCR is going to be its own thing. But right now the athletes are just kind of intertwined a little bit.
Yeah, I think the one, again, to hurt my own case, even though I'm not in these tiers, but the one that is most hard for me, most difficult to discern is stadium racing, because it's like 50-50 obstacles and stations. And so I don't know where that lies on it. Luckily, it doesn't have much importance, so it probably isn't going to be a deal. But I think like an Isaiah could be in a conversation. And if you take out stadium, he's not in a conversation.
Stadiums weigh in literally 0 in the last 3 years. And as you get further back in time, their weight increases. Like they had their pinnacle. Oh, for sure. I think so. Like maybe up until when was the race like where we had all you guys, Hunter, Killian, yourself, Kent.
Wasn't that 2019 City Field?
That's like 3 years ago.
2018.
Yeah. 2018. It has been forever since we've seen a race in the stadiums in which had any weight. It's been years. Like give it like 2015 through 2014 through 2018 or 19, and then the last 3 years, I don't know how much you can weigh that in.
Yeah, last few years, I agree with that. I'd say 18 and 19 were the strong years of stadium racing. You had legitimately deep fields on both sides.
But the last 3 years, then I would say 2-3 years. Yeah.
But is that hybrid racing or is that OCR? It's the most, like if there was a spectrum of it, it sits closest in the middle.
You have a spirit throw, you have monkey bars, you have plinth walls.
There's like kind of terrain. Yeah, the stairs like are different.
There are 5 to 7 rep-based stations. And when they added in the assault bike,
no more.
That matters. So I don't know. Anyways, these oddball events can make or break someone's career, but you can't take a stadium specialist, I don't think, and put him in the all-time list.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess I guess we'll talk about it when we talk about the list, like who those people
Well,
are.
like Kate Kramer went on a 2 or 3 year tear where she was unbeatable.
Unbeatable.
And if you had 2 or 3 years of unbeatableness, if that's a word, in any other form, like if you didn't lose OCR Worlds for 2 or 3 years or Savage outside of Yuri or Spartan, you'd be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to have a conversation maybe in a couple of weeks about Stadium versus Deca, like that conversation you're having. Like, what is Stadium? Where is its place if these other hybrid things exist? But that's for another time.
Yeah,
that's for another time.
So I guess should we answer the question? Is Kempson in our top 10? Is that kind of what we're alluding to?
Well, Jack, I'm sure you have something, a list laid out. Who's your top 5 right now?
My top
Do we agree
5
with the tier 1, tier 2 thing, or is that not how other people were thinking?
I like it. I think once I didn't do it that way, but I think there can be clear lines that we can make,
like Mount Rushmore
tiers
versus other Hall of Famers.
And we're separating men and women because that's where it gets tricky. Okay.
Separating men and women. Yeah, today we're doing men.
Yeah.
Today
Okay. All today. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the fact that they won multiple world championships is the reason. Like most of the people that are going to overlap on our list, we're probably going to have the same 5 in some order. And it's just, you just recognize greatness. You just know that that person was the best of their time or the second best of their time. And you can kind of just fill in the pieces regardless of world championships. They happen to have that, but you knew when they were on a start line, they were the ones who everyone was in fear of.
Let's just list them out. We don't have to go into the deep dive of the resume.
Who's in your 5?
Who's in that 5?
I'll go 5 to 1. 5, I've got Killian, 4, Cody, 3, Hobie, 2, Albin, 1, Atkins.
Okay.
My top 3 is a little bit different. They're all a little bit different actually. Bracken,
I'm writing my list down at this time. I didn't know we had
go
homework.
last.
There's homework.
All right, 5 to 1, and it's super debatable.
Yeah.
5, Cody. 4, Killian. 3, Ryan. 2, John. 1, Hobie. And I'm not even confident on that.
We overlap a little bit more.
We have the same 5, Jack and I.
Yeah. I think we're probably going to have all the same 5.
I had Hunter in my 5.
Really?
Instead of Cody. And I think it's just the multiple disciplines and just like the longevity of it, I guess. And just we're seeing him.
Cody had 8 years that he was around. That's longevity.
That is long. That is longevity.
3 world titles.
Yeah.
He has 3 world titles?
If
you count the Ultra.
Yeah, because he did 2 laps for Bracken's race.
I still don't even understand what happened that year. So I'm not exactly sure.
Cliff notes, the Beast and the Ultra World Championships started at the same time. The Ultra did 2 laps of it, but you could double dip podiums.
So did he win the Beast?
He beat Hobie by like 6 minutes in the Beast and then continued on and won the Ultra.
But everyone did 2 laps. It was like everyone just did it.
But you raced the first one and then you hung on the second.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to. So Cody won the world championships in that year. What year did you say that was?
2012, and then again in 2017.
The long year. It was like 17 and a half miles.
Yeah, it was at the double
because that was the year that
Hobie
kind of fell apart in West Virginia, and he got 7th at Worlds in 17.
He had, what, do you have tooth surgery or some root canal, and he couldn't train or something?
Exactly.
Cody's interesting because he's the last one on my list, yet he's the single scariest racer on there to me. I think if everyone has their absolute best day, all on the same day, I think Cody wins more than he loses against those other 5. However, overall, I have him as the 5th rank because he had more bad days than anyone else, other than maybe Killian towards the end.
And that's the hardest part with me for Killian. It's like he's kind of been humanized a little bit. Granted, he's had different circumstances like over the past couple of years for training, but everybody has excuses for training. But the fact that Cody never really had like bad days, that was kind of the difference maker for me. But then Killian has such versatility with World's Toughest Mudder and a Stadium Series title and like just that huge range, never missing a podium in National Series for like 3 years in a row. It's like, that's just impressive as the field was getting deeper.
Yeah, I mean, these are good points.
Yeah, Let's
still
hear your
like
list before we give away too much for everybody else to consider.
So I mean, it's very similar. I had Hunter 5, Killian 4, Albin 3, Atkins, Hobie.
And I think the only knock on Hunter is that he doesn't have like the statement OCR win.
Yeah.
I would say that toughest mutter. Yeah, the
Asheville
US National.
Great.
Yeah, the USA OCR, and then that toughest mutter 10-mile champion or tougher mutter when he ran away from Batrus, Hobie, all the fast guys in that 10-mile course on a super flat fast course. That was so impressive.
He won OCR North American Champs its inaugural year against a Killian Woods, Batrus,
DeWint.
But he won the 15K and the 3K that year.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one
in my top 5
without a World Spartan title or OCR Worlds title.
Yes. So when we ranked out those pieces, he doesn't have those, and which Cody does, which should jump him. I guess
he replaces it with every hybrid title there.
With every hybrid title, and just kind of him and Hobie, I look at as kind of like these ambassadors for the sport. Like those two probably have like how, the debate about how valuable are the athletes to bringing in more revenue for the company and exposing it to the masses. I think Hobie and Hunter are those two. I think in terms of what they've done for the sport, from an exposure standpoint. Now that might be more of a subjective manner to put them in my top 5 and have Hobie number 1 for sure. But that's just kind of when I was looking at it, what shook out to me. And I didn't know that weird double race thing. So,
Kirk, who's your top 5?
5 Killian, 4 Cody, 3 John, 2 Atkins, 1 Hobie.
Yeah. So I'm the only non-Hobie guy, and I could easily be convinced of that. Honestly, like.
He goes right to the top spot without even hesitation. It's like, is Michael Jordan the best player of all time? Maybe not, but he's always going to be my best player of all time for his overall impact on the sport during his time, for example. I don't know. Hobie is my Michael.
He and Cody did something unique in that they both beat everyone in their prime as aging athletes. And for anyone who wants to debate what era is what, we know this is the best era. We know that. But we know the best from the old era at 39 and 40 beat the 28 to 32 crowd of this era. And that to me is the defining fact. We can't, like, Atkins' resume is almost unassailable. John Albin might just be the best OCR racer of all time, and it might not be close. But Hobie spanked these guys in their prime at 39, and I can't overlook that. At his slowest, because I got to race him at his fastest, and I know what he could have done to these boys then. And so I can't overlook the fact that they had the chance to knock off the old lion and they couldn't do it.
You know what? I've had this debate on other podcasts before, and I had Atkins and Albin as my top 2, and Hobie fell out. But the more I look at it, I keep leaning towards it, even though he's been, he hasn't raced for a few years. He won 78% of the races that he ever did.
Like, are you talking about Hobie?
Hobie. He podiumed 50 of the 55 career races that he did, and he had the longest unbeaten streak, like not only winning. He had 16 races in a row over 13 months that he ended up winning, and he's a 3-time world champ. It's a ridiculous resume. I'm almost leaning towards changing my mind the more I think about it.
I feel like we should go, like, if you wanted to I think you could argue Hobie, Atkins, or John, hands down, could be put in the number 1 spot. I think we should go around and argue, like, even if it's not our number 1, like, why would John be number 1? Why would Atkins be number 1? I think you could make a convincible case for all 3 without question. What do you guys think? You really could.
Let's go. Let's hear why should Atkins be number 1?
Are we doing Albin first or Atkins?
Look at Atkins' range of abilities. He's a 24 Ultra World champ, second at TMX when he puts his hat in the ring, 5-time second place at Spartan World Champs, and a winner. Like, his range is better than anybody else on this list, without question. You cannot combat that.
If you did a stat of average finish position at Spartan World Championships, he's so much better than everyone else.
It's true.
Yeah.
He's actually, he was before Abu Dhabi, he was behind Albin for number 1. So now,
because he had 1 4th place finish in there or something.
Yeah. But Albin did too. But now he's behind.
If greatness is consistency over time, he's the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I asked him back I've said this before, but I asked him, I think in 2016, what would be, if you could just create your course for you, your distance, what is your best OCR distance? He said probably 50K. No, maybe 50 mile. So we all keep saying, like, they just keep making series for Atkins. And I've said it. They just, is it really exciting to see Ryan prove again that he's the best in the mountains? But in his eyes, he's racing down. that's a little bit depressing. And he wins some 3K and he wins a bunch of sprints. So if he is arguably the best all time and we haven't yet done a race at his preferred distance, maybe he's just like been handicapped his whole career.
Jack, an interesting stat, not to put more work on your plate, would be to just take because we all basically had the same 5 other than Hunter being thrown in the mix by Rich, taking the head-to-head stats of each of these athletes against each other and then having like maybe you already have this, having like an objective statistical winner, like who is statistically percentage-wise head-to-head against all of these the best of all time. Like we probably could just put it on paper.
So I remember this. If you took Battle Frog, Warrior Dash World Championship, all Spartans, all Tough Mudder, any OCR related event, I think that it was 8-8 head-to-head Hobie versus Atkins, and Atkins had one more win head-to-head against Alvin, and now I think it's 2 because of Abu Dhabi. So I think that he has the best head-to-head record against everybody, and that was my justification before. But I don't want to misquote it without the numbers. That's just my gut remembering what it was before.
If you throw in like the Killian and the Cody, like, and you put them all like a 1-to-1, head-to-head battles, and then mix in all the percentages and wins, I'd just be very curious. Like, would Hobie easily rise to the top, and it'd be a no-brainer if you put everybody against everybody? I don't know. I'd be very curious. It's an interesting.
It depends on if you're looking at Spartan only or everything. That's gonna affect things.
My final argument for Atkins is the greatest of all time is that Hobie and Killian, 2 of their greatest strengths, were showing up when it counted, perfectly fit and matched for the course.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't have created a better year or race than Tahoe for Killian's first and second championships. Hobie had a freak, and I put Killian in there, probably the 2 biggest freaks. And then Hunter would be third in terms of going all in on getting perfectly ready for one event and executing. They can just show up and change their fitness during a training camp.
Did you name Killian in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Killian, Hobie, and Hunter have a unique ability to go all in and tangibly get better when they work on a certain course. And Atkins is the antithesis to that. Mm-hmm. He just races on whatever he's done. He's taken second place off like 5 different preceding buildups. One of which was just going and getting like dengue fever for 4 months in the Amazon. Like it is ridiculous, the ability for him to perform off of no specific preparation. And Hunter said it for years. He said, every year I tell that guy, just go all in and win a championship and shut everyone up. And Atkins like, that's not how I want to live. So if he can do this off B tier planning, he's the best ever.
Well, the results need to back it up, right? Like he needs to have put that time in, like Killian or even Cody that one year did that where he didn't race too much, showed up and crushed everybody at Tahoe. It's like the potential is probably like you could probably put that head and shoulders above everybody else. Like if he did specifically prepare, maybe he has 4 world titles at this point, but he doesn't. He has
anybody who can do the eco challenge and not sleep for 2 weeks straight and then show up and take second place, like done deal.
Crazy. I will throw out a couple more stats that I found. These were as of 2020 or 2021, sometime during that. So it's not including this year. But since you guys all had Hobie as your number 1 and Atkins, I had, if you look at percent of winner in races, Atkins was 98.6%. Hobie was 98.7%, virtually identical. If you look at major races on the podium, Atkins was 76.5 and Hobie was 76.9. If you look at major race percent of winner, not just local ones, Atkins was 98.2, Hobie was behind in 97.9. So they're both right there. Like it's basically insignificant how close they are, or the difference between the 2 of them. So Atkins doing it in a slightly better era, Hobie doing it at the end of his career when he wasn't at his peak. It's like you can weigh both of those. But it's so easy to make an argument for Atkins.
So we've listed about 6 athletes that would be in our top tier. We could say 5 if we want to drop Hunter down, since I was the only one who kind of mentioned that. So he's kind of in that middle spot. What would we think about from like 6 to 10 then? What's this second tier looking like for us? This is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because now it's not as shiny, as glamorous, as easy to kind of point to. So now it's like, all right, now we really got to take in consideration with these things that we talked about.
Let's list 6 only. I want to know who everyone has specifically. Who is the closest to that argument?
It's no question who it is.
Is it Hunter for everybody?
Is one him or VJ? I mean, VJ's got to be sitting there feeling horribly disrespected right now, and he's a year away from being in the top 5 without question, right? He just needs to finish out the season, and I'm going to plug him in somewhere. He's going to earn it.
I agree.
It's just what it is. So yeah, those 2 for sure.
Well, I had Cody 6. So I mean, that's just flip-flopping the 5 and 6 there.
My next 2 are tied, as are my next 2 after that, and that's Hunter and VJ.
Yeah.
VJ's only downfall is that they're testing his worst skill for terms of Spartan World Championships and OCR World Championships. It's just mountain long. That's it. If someone decided, what's the coolest thing ever? It's just being faster and smoother and better on obstacles than everyone, and we're just going to test 30 or 40 or even 60 minutes or less. Suddenly he's in the argument for greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the different test, and he's young.
Right. He's still ascending. Like he's still like his greatest accomplishment happened last year. Right. And
he just won his first beast, and it was a massive win.
Mm-hmm. World Championships with a super this year. Like he won a world championship at the same course that OCR World is going to be at again. Like he's going to pad his resume this year, and easy argument for top 5 once the year's done, assuming he takes care of business like you guys have been saying recently. And I don't know, I feel 3 years from now he could be contending for number 1 with a few more accomplishments.
I really wish we could just cement our 5 right now and put them on the mountain, so that worst case scenario, you can only add people to it, because someone's going to get booted off there, and eventually it's going to be Cody and Killian. Mm-hmm. And neither of those guys deserve to ever. Killian might be the most underrated OCR athlete ever. Yeah. Like we reward Atkins going up, Killian's gone up, and Killian's gone down. So one of those 2, if not both, will eventually be booted out off Mount Rushmore, and that is so disrespectful.
The founding fathers got to stay.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this is the pioneers of the sport. It's not like old Hoss Radbourne in baseball in the 1880s. So he wouldn't compare to the greatest currently playing the game. But if you look at OCR in the early years, those guys would have held their own against anybody in today's modern era. So you're right. You can't get rid of their legacy, but they're going to disappear. And people who start following the sport 5 years from now and never heard of it right now, they're going to look back and be like, oh, well, I didn't even think they were that good, because they're not like mentioned in the top 5 anymore. But I totally agree. You have to kind of like cement them in there just to keep their legacy alive, in the future.
You can't cement someone as the greatest of all time.
No. Other people Mount Rushmore has not been modified since it was built, fellas.
That's right.
There have been better presidents since. That's still standing.
Yeah.
I think it's mandatory viewing for people to go back and watch the old NBC coverage of Hobie and Cody just once a year.
Slaughtering.
This morning I watched Breckenridge.
You're saying that so they see you in there.
Yeah.
No, you won't see me. I'm talking Breckenridge, and what was that? 2015, Jack? 2017?
That was when they missed a spear in a sprint and still came back, right?
No, I'm talking about the Beast, when Cody put like 4 or 6 minutes on all of these guys.
15 was a sprint, 16 was the Beast.
2016 Breckenridge, and then 2016 Tahoe. I'm not in either of those videos, Kirk, and those are mandatory viewing to see how fast those guys are. Even watching Hobie, I watched this morning just to refresh myself on who do I really think is better for the greatest of all time. I've never seen someone run on course the way Hobie and Cody run when they're rolling. None of the guys still touch it. It's ridiculous. So as long as we still have those videos out there showing them racing, Albin and Atkins, for at least the next 10 years, there's an ABC comparison. People can say, I didn't see them, but I saw Atkins and Albin. And here I see videos of them spanking those 2. So at least we can still appreciate their greatness. And I know I'm starting to sound like that crabby old head. He's like, my day. Well, it still holds up though. Like, I don't want to be Kendrick Perkins, but it still holds up. If you reset everyone to 30 years old, are we really going to bet against Hobie?
Well, this is like watching the Pistons beat the Bulls and then stop watching basketball and be like, Michael Jordan can't be above Isaiah Thomas on the all-time list. Their teams weren't even, and then like the next 8 years, next 6 years, 10 years or whatever it was, like, oh, it's clearly changed. So this is what's going to happen with the VJs and you know, how things go with the Rylands and the Hawks. Like these people are going to come up and they're going to have to lay their own work in and eventually surpass some of these people that are in our top four.
Well, VJ and Ryland are going to have to beat Atkins and Albin to ever say they were better than Hobie. You know, because Hobie established himself in Atkins's prime, Hobie was still considered better. He won almost the entire national series and a world title on back-to-back years in Atkins' 29 and 30 years or 28 and 29-year-old years. So since he established that, those two have to do that to Atkins in order to ever say that they could have the chance of being the GOAT. They have to beat both of the GOAT's accomplishments.
I'm not sure I follow the logic, but I kind of get what you're saying. But at the same time, it's like when VJ is 33, like he might be at his pinnacle then, and then Atkins will be in his 40s, and he won't have that ability to knock him off. Like, it just seems like a timing thing, right?
So we agree, Hunter and VJ are the next two up.
Yep.
Yes.
And
this is where it gets interesting.
Well, I see, and I think you guys are going to argue with me on this, but I think 8 is a lock. Which I know 8, 9, and 10 we're going to start splitting hairs. In my opinion, 8's a lock, and I want to know if any of you think that about your number 8.
Ryan Woods.
Ryan Woods, thank you.
And I have him tied with Kempson.
He had the most dominant 18 Spartan U.S. National Series of probably any Spartan U.S. National Series other than Hobie Call. The year prior, maybe.
And Yatsko did the same thing back in the day as well.
And with Ryan Woods, like his consistency in Savage Race until this year has been unparalleled, really, until maybe what Kempson has recently done. And he's been a contender in every single Spartan Race World Championship race until he messes it up. Sorry, somehow.
We have a little E next to the thing. You can say whatever you want.
Sorry about that, folks. I feel like I can swear on the running public, but not.
You can swear on this one. That should be
fun. So I think Ryan Woods, lock it in.
I actually was very torn between Woods and the other guy that I essentially have him tied with. The only reason why I'm giving it to Woods is because he's actually been able to show up to Tahoe. The unfortunate thing for Sergey Pereligan, who got second in Abu Dhabi, never was able to race against the best people because he's from Russia and just wasn't able to get a visa. He wanted to face the best people. He won European championships one year and wanted to come over world championship. He couldn't do it. And then OCR World, second place, third place. He has several of those, got second in Abu Dhabi. Like he has a heck of a resume. And it's just a shame that he's never had that opportunity to face most of the best in the US or travel to North America, essentially outside of Canada. So that's his only downfall, and it's not really his fault. But I think body of work, you have to give it to Woods because of what he's accomplished throughout his career.
Bracken, when you said, watch old Cody and watch old Hobie and the way they ran and dominated, and then you go back and watch Ryan Woods in the 2018 season in San Jose, in Chicago, the way he led the field up the Tahoe climb, I would say like he's even more than like any performance I can think of John Albin in like a Spartan race. Like Ryan Woods has gone and handed it to the best and made us all look like idiots. Yeah. At time. You could argue to bump him up if he didn't have like a COVID year or two and he was able to continue that for longer, he'd be even further up the list. His downfall is he hasn't spread his wings into stadiums or hybrid or any other arena to just put some more frosting on his cake.
Didn't.
True. Wasn't available to him either then.
I can't argue with your running comment. He's the only one that can run like Cody Moat on trails. But I think that he's hamstrung by a few things. One, historically, and Ryan's my buddy. I'm saying this as a black and white analysis of his career, and he's not going to like two of these three things. He'll agree with my first one. Ryan's not super athletic. So you're not going to see him do hybrid racing. You're not going to see him do stadiums. You're not going to see him try other things because that's not in his wheelhouse. So that's one thing where Kempson and Sergey both can do and he can't. So his running trumps theirs. Their athleticism trumps him. The next two he's not going to like, but I think it needs to be said for the health of the sport. The first is he's the only guy with a positive drug test. And I do not care. I do not care what the circumstance is. You can't just wipe that away. Even if everything he said is right, which you're going to have people argue that it's nonsense. It doesn't matter what your take is. He has that stain on the pinnacle of his career. That was coming off of his second best year, and it happened right before his best year. So you have to have an asterisk there just by the laws of sport. And then the third thing is, when you look at Sergey and Kempson and you look at Woods, there are two distinct camps. There is finding a way to lose races and finding a way to win races. Now, Woods has won as many races as any of them, but the big races, he finds a way off the top, and they find a way to claw their way onto the top. And so while I think his best day beats their best day 100 times out of 100, all those balance out, and I have them as a dead heat tie for that 8th position. So that's my long-winded argument for that.
Great arguments. Fantastic.
Those are great points. And like, what would you say if we're matching up the three of those? Because I actually had Woods below Kempson and Sergey, probably because of the things that Bracken had mentioned. But what would you say would be Woods's crowning achievement? Was it that North American Championship win? Is it the series win?
He did that win like every race for a year and a half. He spanked people like we haven't seen people spank. He was true. You talk about those on everyone's best day. Who are you worried about? You can't touch Woods on his best day. You know that unless you're one of the top 5 guys we talked about, you don't even have a prayer. And he did that for a year,
but not at Spartan World Championships.
But he started to
at OCR World Championships.
And an issue always happened, whether it was the spear or usually it was the spear.
That's what I'm saying. Like, where's his result? If it was on paper and not necessarily like being there and like knowing what greatness Woods has.
You didn't know he did burpees in a puddle that got him cold. Like, if you don't know the backstory.
He got penalized for it, and like, the trust thing and all these things that are just like haunting Woods. His best accomplishment, is it better than an OCR World Championship, even though that one may have an asterisk? Like, like the best ones, right?
I don't think there's a title that's better, but people talk about the difference between a 320-foot home run and a 520-foot home run. They count the same, but in the annals of history, they're not the same. That's Woods. Like, when he wins and he puts it together, it's a 500-foot home run. I talk about Cody's Breckenridge win. Woods had like 4 of those in a year.
Is he Charles Barkley?
I don't know in which way you mean.
Like, there's no big title, so instantly he's dropped below.
He got an MVP,
He might be the best
title.
player. He may have been the best player in the league 2 or 3 times. If Jordan wasn't there, he was like the second best player, right? But
of those 3, Kempson, Sergey, Woods, I say Woods the best. Sergey has the most titles to his name. Kempson's the scariest athlete to me, but Woods is not touchable on his best day.
So just to kind of close this up, you guys all have Kempson in your top 10, right? I don't.
Okay. Who else? Who are we missing?
I think Ryan Kent's had a better career.
I have Kent in mine.
Kent is my next guy.
Mine too.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
are the big marquee performances?
Sorry, you cut out real quick. You said Kempson or Kent?
Ryan Kent is after those 3 guys tied, Kent is my next up.
So that,
and if we count 10. Hybrid higher, he jumps them.
I agree. Yeah.
He might be my 6, 7. He's my 8.
Yeah.
Hybrid counts.
Mm-hmm. But then that pushes Hunter potentially into the top 5. So that's the tricky part. But
right.
I think Kent alone with OCR, he has still accomplished a crap ton of stuff that puts him in the conversation regardless. But I also think like Albert Soleil, Angel, a couple guys in Europe like Thomas Buell, Thibaut Debouché, that like people don't know about their accomplishments. But if you look at the European scene and how dangerous they've been and how well they've done at OCR Worlds when they've shown up.
That's my tier 3.
They've had better careers than Kempson, to be objective.
Strength of schedule is what I count there. You're right. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I'd even say Matt Murphy's had a better career than Kempson, to be honest.
False.
And I know that you don't believe that.
No.
And I'm staying with a guy from Australia staying with me right now. and just some of the stories about Matt Murphy's fitness is just ridiculous. And he's got the
that doesn't
results.
count. Stories about fitness
I
doesn't
know.
count.
No, I know, but like Matt Murphy, another argument I was considering putting him around 10. He ran like 28 or 30 races, and only one time he missed second place or first place. Like,
But how many were on an island?
I mean, isn't North America an island, technically? He got second place there once at Spartan Worlds.
Right, but like, we can't count everything the same.
No, he's not in my top 10. I don't want to get that distracted. I'm just saying people who could be justified ahead of Peter Ziska. Like, you could put some people ahead of Kempson.
As soon as you start saying could have, I think that's all tier 3.
Yeah, and he's lumped in that. Kempson's somewhere in like 11 to 15 for me.
Okay. I think he has the same amount of firsts and seconds at big national series events as Ryan Kent. And if they're not identical, they're one different on both of those. They've had their statement super wins, and they don't have the Kent doesn't have the OCR Worlds or the Savage because he hasn't done it. His is replaced with hybrid, and Kempson has stadium success as well. So I think on
Kempson
paper,
has,
as just a Spartan athlete, they're equivalent.
Yeah, because Kempson has the third place at the North American Championships in 19 and the third place in Alabama. So he had 3 podium finishes in that year alone, which was his breakout year. And then he was on the podium in Jacksonville in 2020. So he might have a little bit. How many podiums?
Kent has a West Virginia second place.
Seattle, West Virginia.
Couple Seattle.
He has a San Jose second place.
Yeah.
The way in Seattle when he did 30 burpees and still ran himself back into third was one of probably his most impressive performance of all time, believe it or not, even though it was a third place finish.
And Kent was like 6th at Tahoe within striking distance of Cody Moat. Like, I'm talking 10, 15 seconds behind him for missing top 5 in a year where everybody showed up. Like, he's had a hell of a career.
Yeah. Okay. He basically had Kempson's career just earlier in terms of their pinnacles.
Yeah. I think if Kent didn't want to go to hybrid and he stuck with Spartan, he still would have been, producing great results over the past couple of years. That's just his focus. He'd rather train hybrid.
Yeah, he almost ran as well as he and Hunter both almost ran Atkins's race in slow without doing any Spartan work.
Yeah.
We're to the point now where everyone has an argument that they're right or wrong, and you're going to have that from here on out. But I still think these guys are actually better than that tier 3.
Okay.
Where are you drawing the line for tier 3? Where's tier 2 starts after Cody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't this list ending at 10? Isn't this a top 10 list? So I
ended up with 17 just because I couldn't stop. 18.
Let's keep going. We got at least 20 more minutes.
We got the
women to do.
No, we're not doing
that next time.
Oh, good. Then let's get deep in the woods.
Let's keep going.
So after Kempson, Woods, Kent, Sergey, I have a hard stop. And after that is tier 3. And that's where you have all the maybes. There's an argument for that you could be tier 2. But if we did this like how they do all pro rankings, where it's like first place votes, second place, third, you're going to get no first place votes for any of these guys. You're going to have a lot of third place in a few seconds, but no one's going to ever argue that they have a chance to be the greatest of all time. And if there's not one world title in yours, and if there's not multiple somethings that are super impressive, to me, it's third tier. Now, Albert, I think, could be argued into tier 2. But for me, it's Albert, Isaiah, Heineck, Angel, Ziska.
This is your international tier.
I think you got to put Botras on the list. If you don't put Botras, you're forgetting about a lot of his past performances.
Well, Bracken, where are you here? Jack, where's Bracken in when we're talking about this tier?
You can't rank yourself.
I'd say he's probably around 20 to 25. Like, if you look at all-time stat, I'd put him on the list I don't know, maybe high teens. He's probably just after those names that he listed right there in terms of career accomplishments.
Yeah, had him in those names.
Yeah.
I have me 15, but I don't get to vote for me.
You just said you couldn't rank yourself, and then you gave us
I
a
can
hard
rank
ranking.
myself. I can't make the case for myself because that's too self-serving.
Yeah.
But my ranking is 15, and I will always value myself higher than the stats will value me.
I have you above guys who might have had more impressive performances, like a Johnny or Matt Novakovic, but like career, you've had a better career than those like outstanding
I can't compare my result. You can compare Hobie and Cody. I don't think you can compare my results to this era.
You can't compare eras. They're just different things. So your
You can
results
compare the
are
best of the
results.
era.
Well, if
But
you
you
had some
can't-
honest cracks at some races in the last 3 years, it'd be a different conversation. But that
Yeah.
hasn't been available
Those
to
are
you,
ifs and
unfortunately.
buts.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying.
Those top 5 guys, I don't know.
What about
I'd
that
beat
super short
once-
course? What about
Once or
that really
twice each.
that super short course that I went on a YouTube hole in Atlas Games or whatever it was?
Europa.
I'm the GOAT there.
Yeah, right. That's a championship.
That doesn't count.
What if we had to dive down the rabbit hole of, like, if we had to make this list in 5 years, knowing the trajectory of who we currently know, who do you think we would wedge their way into the top 10 if they stay with the sport?
Like on the projection.
Yeah,
of
like
where
if we had to
exactly it should
change,
be.
like if we had to change this up, like who would make their way in potentially? Like who's the corral of guys?
I don't
No
think
one.
anybody right now.
I would have said Veerman a year ago. I would have said Johnny 2 years ago. I would have said Rylan 9 months ago. Like, we get excited about people, but then we've got to see body of work. I can't say for sure. Lars Arneson.
Oh, he did it. You gave one.
Gosh. I think
yeah.
VJ's the only one. He can move up. No one else is coming in at the moment.
I think
They all
Ryland
could.
has a shot. I mean,
They
he's
all
only
could.
Yeah, he already has a National Series podium, and he's barely running these races. Hawk the same way. I think those are the athletes right now who are young.
I mean, it's like 5, 6, 8 for these finishes. Like, very impressive in today's field, but is that better than Woods or Kent, who we were trying to figure out if they still should be in the top 10? Is that
Well,
better than Kempson?
The tough thing is, like, then our minds are already made up. Then our Mount Rushmore might as well be 10 people, and then just etch them in stone, and then that's it, right? Like, there's got to be some flex here.
Every guy I named,
fogies.
every single guy I named can.
What's
if
the
they
young-
stick with-
What's the youngest guy between us four? How old is that?
Jack.
32.
Okay, the rest of us are old hags. We're
Old.
going to be biased towards the good old days. We
Here's
gotta
the issue.
somehow scrap that.
My freshman year of college, I'm sitting in my dorm room down at Campbell University, and I'm watching Tony Kornheiser doing his what is that, PTI?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the question is posed to him: who has the better career, Vince Young, Matt Leinart, and Mark Sanchez? And they're all coming off of their storied college careers, and they're all in talks for #1 pick. And the consensus on the show, they all agree that at some point all three will win an MVP and a Super Bowl. Not necessarily the same year, but they'll all be Super Bowl winners someday, and most likely an MVP. That you could build a franchise along any three, because at that time, the information available said that this is what's going to happen. And guys, we didn't have to go 10 years in the future to see that was horrible prediction. But that happens every single year. There's the new hot thing. But how many new hot things have there been that just don't pan out? What are the odds? And I'm not saying Johnny hasn't panned out, but what are the odds we'd be sitting here not saying Johnny will definitely be a top 10 or 15 all time? After that one season, we're like, all he's going to do is get faster. All he's going to do is get smoother on obstacle. All he's going to do is get better at his climbing. No one's going to be able to touch this kid in 2 years. And life doesn't follow our plan. So my point is, let's just remember Vince Evans, Matt Leinart, and butt fumble himself, Mark
Vince
Sanchez.
Young.
Yeah.
Vince
Don't,
Young.
don't even remember him.
Like this, we don't have the body of work yet.
That's fair. And the sport is just so new that the people who might be already establishing themselves with these accomplishments are Ryan Kempsons.
I would say Rich Ryan has as good a shot as any of them.
Let's go. Hybrid.
You've been the highest ranked in the world out of any person we just mentioned.
I will always have that. Thank you. And then there's a world championship coming up later this year, even though it's just going to be of domestic athletes. World championship.
Chris Woolley might be there.
He might be there, right?
Yeah.
What about the guys that like poked their head in for a minute? If they would have stuck with it, do you have anybody that jumps out there?
Like a Josh McAdams,
like a Josh McAdams, or like a JP
Yatsko.
Donovan?
Yatsko's the easiest, but I watched 2016 Tahoe this year. Jack Bauer, who is the greatest unrecognized talent we've ever seen in this sport.
Chad Trammell.
No, we saw him for 5 years.
If he stuck with it, though, I think
Second place coming out of the spear throw 2016.
What's Aaron Fletcher?
Aaron Fletcher
Yeah.
was a flat out monster.
member of the Stormin' Mormons on the team ranks.
And never came back.
Yeah.
Halfway through Tahoe, he's in second place, stuck his spear past Killian and is trying to run Cody down, and then ended up burping and cramping, whatever, and finished. What did he finish that year? 6?
No, he wasn't in the top 10. No, I'll look it up, but he was not.
He was strong. He was fast, and he was climbing at altitude and descending with the best in the sport, and never came back.
Who on this list has outpunted their coverage? Who have we gotten the most juice out of their squeeze? Like you said, Ryan Woods always messes up, and so he's gotten like the least juice out of his squeeze,
always.
right? Okay,
Just
well, whatever. I'm
in high-profile situations.
So who do you think's gotten the most juice out of their squeeze? Like the one who like just showed up and got it done?
Is it not Kempson?
I go Kempson.
Yeah.
Talent-wise, I would say Kempson, but I don't know how you argue against Ryan Atkins.
Well, just what we were saying before, how he's never certainly prepared for any event.
True. I'm responding to they showed up and got it done.
Oh, I thought the way
Flat courses, steep courses, mucky courses.
Just looking at running metrics and top end capability, and then yet where they still finish.
Hunter Kent Kempson.
I think Kent's in there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, Bracken, just to Fletcher got 17th that year.
So he did fade more than I thought.
836 steeplechaser.
Wow, really?
Cruising.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
So
what was Joshua McAdams? What was Josh McAdams' best steeple? He had to be down.
I think he was under 30.
820.
He's 20 high, I think.
Yeah. And he didn't come in till he was like 40, didn't he? Or 39 when he ran his first couple of races. He would have been fun to stick around.
821.
Whew.
So fast.
He must have been close to like the U.S. record at the time. What about Max King? Didn't he dip his toe in?
829 or 828. He and I'm blanking on his name. His buddy from Bend, who they took 8th and 9th at Olympic trials that year in steeplechase, going like 828, 829 or 27, 26 or whatever it was. They both came to that first Atlas race in Oregon.
John Riccardi.
Yeah.
I'm like
the two freakiest runners I've ever seen on course were Herman Silva. I've never seen a man in my life run up 30% incline the way Herman Silva did. And this was already after like 120 burpees. Just the way we would run a tempo for like 5 minutes up Killington is how he ran every step of that course until he snapped his leg right in front of me.
Jeez.
And then the second freakiest was, oh my goodness, David Torrance. He did 30 burpees at the monkey bars in Tahoe and ran me down within a quarter mile. And he went past me like he was doing an FKT to the top of the mountain.
He and AJ Acosta showed up there thinking they were going to win $30,000 and just.
AJ Acosta showed up? Really?
David Torrance was the 10K champ that year and had run 351 in a mile. 350.
Yeah.
It looked like it.
Yeah.
How'd dude snap his leg in front of you?
He swung on the monkey bars, lost his grip, and went back weird and landed on it. And you just heard.
So that was like Nicole-esque getting off at Hildervat?
No, he fell off in the middle. But
Oof.
same kind of thing, yeah.
David Torrance passed away in the pool a couple years ago,
yes,
right?
he did.
Yeah.
But those two, Herman Silva was 208 or 205 in a marathon. Won New York City marathon
New York
twice.
Cities. Yeah.
And he was like 42 when he did Spartan World Championships.
What are those guys
fly
doing? Is that a Joe like sliding into their inbox, telling them to come out?
They brought in a ton of Olympians that year. They brought in a triathlete from Wisconsin. They brought in just a whole bunch of people. And
I'd love to see a little
Morgan Aratola. They brought her.
Is she the best to never be realized?
I mean, didn't she have like a 30-minute lead, like 10K into Killington?
No,
it wasn't not even exaggerating.
But it was big.
Yeah.
And then she hypothermia / quit after burpees.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else we want to talk about when we talk about the top 15? I don't think we quite solidified that down. We talked about Batris for a second with that World's Toughest Mudder, and he's still cranking out accomplishments with getting on the podiums.
Without a hiatus, I think Josiah would have been in this list.
Yeah.
Too late.
He's not
33.
Yeah, he's not, and he's 43. He's not getting any faster, but just connect the dots in between his career. He could have been.
Put in perspective, Hobie's running ability back in the day. He ran Josiah's wheels off in Texas. at that world championship.
Jeez.
I mean, that was 33-year-old or 34 Josiah on a flat course.
Do we know, speaking of Hobie, do we know, like if we were to dissect and compare himself to Hawk and then they're
Hobie's
running,
faster.
Hobie is faster than Hawk?
Hobie was
College times,
14
everything.
flat or 14:02 in college, and then
What is Hawk?
2:17,
1440 or something.
What is Hawk's 5K?
1440-ish.
So it's not, he's
not
quite a
even
ways
1440
behind.
close.
Okay. So we don't think we're going to see like the
I've
second
actually-
coming of Hobie here at some point. Like they're just very different athletes.
No.
That's
Hard to tell.
Yeah.
Hobie went through this massive weight vest training, lunging, and pull-up block before his first one because he was trying out hybrid training to get healthy for a marathon. So Hawk hasn't gone through that yet, but Hobie was about 15 seconds per mile faster in a 5K.
Got it.
Plus could hold
Yeah.
513,
Hobie was a
512
14:01.
for 26 miles.
Yeah. Hobie went 2:16:39 for a marathon, 104 flat for a half, 29:41 for 10K, and 14:01 for a 5K, according to a message I've got with them. So
104 flat might be his most impressive performance. That's
Nasty.
incredible.
216's better, but it was downhill.
sub
That's
5.
fast.
Yeah. But it was at elevation. But yeah. 104 flat.
What's
though,
216?
that's,
What pace is 216:38?
510s maybe?
5:12.
And that's why it was so hard to put in perspective for people how fast Hobie was, because 5:12 was like aerobic threshold for him. You
Right.
know, 5:15 was
Not
aerobic
even-
threshold.
Yeah. Not
So
even.
his mod initially, when he'd come off an obstacle, he would just run 5 to 5:10 casually. And that wasn't surging. That was just like recovery. It was his first few years were freaky.
Good
use of the word mod. We haven't said mod the entire episode. So
Are you guys getting blown up with mod DMs ever since the episode came out?
a
Because
lot of people have good ideas.
the ideas are really rampant these days. You know,
This is random. This doesn't have to do with the episode, but speaking of freaky, Ryan Atkins' pass on Killian after the bucket to close out the race in 2016, and he almost ran Hobie down. He was running, I would say, 440, 450 coming off the bucket, 13 and a half miles into Tahoe to close out that race.
Atkins.
Yeah,
Twice
and they
the
caught
speed
it
of
on
Killian.
camera for a little bit. It was freaky.
Are you talking about that one section when Killian's they're about to enter a single track and
Yep.
Atkins is like, I made a move right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was,
And I
That
was
was
standing
insane.
right there watching that year, and Atkins kept it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a FU move. It was, this is now the pace I'm running for the rest of the race.
that bucket carry is still the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life. That 1200 meter bucket carry.
I didn't
Hands
drop
down.
it once. That was my
Really?
favorite bucket carry.
That was my first year in the sport, and I dropped it probably 12 times. It was
Which
Which year?
over a kilometer.
16?
Yeah.
216. Faye, Lindsay, they both passed me on that. Yep, I felt like a real schmuck out there.
I think I gave it to you that year too, Kirk. I think that was the only time I beat you.
No,
Busted
I was
that
the
ass.
leaderboard's #1 finisher still.
I don't think I was on leaderboard yet.
I was at.
I can look this up.
What place were you in 2016? I was 58th, I think. So let's not go.
I was mid 30s, 16 and 17, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then
That was
and then
72.
But then I smacked you in 17 and beyond, Rich.
that's 19 crushed. That's one thing we didn't mention about Kempson. He has some epic blow ups. I was on his athlinks today. He has some 80s in there. He has
This
some
man's not afraid to go
60s.
for it.
He is not.
Respect.
Just-
All right, so I just
It's
want to
like a
read
high-
out some people I don't think got talked about enough.
Okay.
Angel Quintero,
Yep.
Richard Heineck, Peter Ziska, Isaiah Vidal, Albert Soleil. Those
This
are
is
my people
International.
that most are international, but they all have a claim for tier 2. I would add them and Alvin to the list of their biggest weakness is they don't live in North America. If John Albin lived in North America, there might not be a debate over who the best of all time is.
True. Recency bias with I don't know, I'm forgetting his name now. Mexican guy.
Angel Quintero.
Angel
Zero.
is a little tough. Yeah, well,
Antonio.
that's very
Hero,
recent.
number
Yeah.
top 10 already.
Angel recency bias is pretty rough on his for him.
What's the claim for his to be in these type of tiers? Like what is his biggest accomplishment type of deal, or is he
couple national series podiums? He got 8th at OCR Worlds and like 6th at Tahoe once. He's had some good performances.
He's the Mexican version of Woods at championship races, where he is on screen at least halfway through every single Tahoe, every single NBC race he runs, every single national series. He's just always there, and he finds a way off the podium. But he's kind of Woods-ish in his ability to climb, descend, run at altitude. He's just good. But he's never broke through on the international stage.
Right. Like he doesn't have that one thing we can point to.
Beat me in a stadium.
Internationally, you traveled to him though, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you did 30 of everything.
We're not counting all those things. Like that's the result is the result.
Demerits.
He can run stadiums.
You wouldn't put yourself over on Angel?
No, I have him, but my vote doesn't count. He's in the talks.
Yeah. Okay.
How about Nick Girello? He gets overlooked a lot.
Does get overlooked a lot.
Just doesn't show up to the big races enough.
Yeah.
He got 5th at West Virginia once, or 4th.
I think he was 5th at the 15K too for OCR World Championships.
Yeah, he had a good top 10 finish there.
And crushes everybody or everybody except Atkins when he's left with the Canadian
close.
Series on his own. Yeah, he's around
up there. Yeah.
He might be in the expanded top 25, maybe.
This is interesting because I think if this list was done like 3-4 years ago, do you think people would have been putting Matt Novakovic in the list? He didn't really get brought up, period, at all.
No, I don't think so.
I feel like he has kind of a reputation for people who were around back then and still paying attention. But I think if you kind of look at it with, an objective point of view, he doesn't have the career that a lot of people kind of.
He was just on TV when the races were on TV and stuff.
Exactly.
We made this list in 2016. He'd be on the list. That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Jack, you have the rankings. You have your everything. Who is the best that hasn't been talked about? Who is the most like unheralded athlete so far that's not on there?
Highest ranking, probably Seb Conrad Hackinson. He has the highest ranking. He was like a 96 or something, and he got 2nd at the 24-hour championships. We know how good of a runner he is. That's kind of what he's focusing on now. But he was the first guy to beat Albert Soleil. He got top 5 at European champs. He had like some ridiculous podium streak to start his career as well. But he's just shifted more towards trail running at this point.
Where does he put longevity? Yeah, Isaiah's a good one.
Where do you put him?
Isaiah?
Because he had a streak in there as well, where he won like 9 races one year, and he beat a bunch of big names, and he can do multi-sport or multi-modality races. Where does he rank?
I mean, Isaiah's got 5 top 10 at Spartan World Championship. It's like Hunter, Atkins, Albin, Hobie, Cody, like it's Killian, like that's a pretty elite list. I think Chad Trammell and Glenn Race are the only other ones with that. You don't get 5 top 10s.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say you don't get 5 top 10s without being top tier talent, and it's not his skill set. They were all on brutal mountain courses. He's more of a functional hybrid athlete, and he still was able to do it. So super impressive.
Won the Spartan Cruise.
Isaiah would have had 6 probably top 10s if he didn't go in a box and run on a treadmill for 24 hours. The Spartan World Champs. Remember when he got talked into that and decided to do that instead?
It's a good idea. I think you should keep that around.
Force in stadiums. Yeah. He's been TMX and he's won an ultra.
Yep.
The way that man runs with what he's working with is incredible. He may be like out punting his coverage as far as just like physique and endurance events out of anybody on this list.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
It's like a pit bull running a marathon and running like 220. It's
yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I've been behind him in a race, watching him run and just being like, oh, I'm gobbling him up. And I look up again and I'm 10 meters further behind, just watching his form, thinking he's not running faster than I am. I know that, and I'm not catching him. What? I ran college track. Why is that thing ahead of me pulling away from me? And yet it was. He milked every drop out of his talent.
Yeah, I've got him like 11 to 15, somewhere in that range, kind of in the same mold as Kempson. Kempson's probably had higher peaks, but body of work, Isaiah.
Yeah.
All right, dudes. I think we've done enough here. We got top 15 to 20-ish. We definitely solidified that. That top 10 is pretty good, and I think that's pretty solid. We had some in that like 8 to 10 range were up for debate, but I think we did a good job. And I think, Kempson's not done. He could still move his way up these rankings with a couple more big performances. We'll see what he does this year at OCR World Championships. How's that looking? How's that playing out to be? Are we expecting there to be the international contingent coming over more? And now that Tahoe is not a championship race outside of the 24-hour,
which hurts actually. It's the
Jesse
same crowd.
who just won European, said he's coming over.
Who's
European
that?
3K. Jesse DeHare from, I think, the Netherlands. He just won European 3K, and he's gonna come over and give VJ a run for his money.
Okay.
That'd
Albin, do we know? Is he done?
I don't know.
He's just so good.
I'm shocked he's playing around. If he never plays around in OCR again, I wouldn't be surprised.
I would expect him to not.
Yeah, he's just so good now.
I don't know.
It's a payday.
It's so easy money compared to the trails.
Yeah.
He's not going to
come to OCR World. You leave with $25,000 and go back home.
Yeah, it's fair. But it's
I get what you're saying. He's now world level mountain runner.
Yeah.
Yep.
You ever combed through his Strava recently and seen some of the metrics he's putting out? It's absolutely mind blowing.
Did you see that half marathon with Killian?
Mm-hmm.
They ran like a 85-minute half marathon, but it had like 5,000 feet of ascent or something.
It was only up. You just go up.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's craziness.
And it looked like a lot of switchbacks, which is the worst style of road running uphill ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't they run like sub 7-minute pace?
Yeah.
But like with like 5,000 feet of gain, like something you can't even wrap your head around.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. They just basically set the treadmill to 15% and ran sub 7 for 85 minutes.
What?
Maybe not 15%.
Like shit about myself is what that does.
Any race recap that goes, Killian, I couldn't stay with him around mile 11. I was like, okay, you're a legitimate runner. Killian surged from 11 to 12, and I couldn't quite stay with him. I could have started at mile 10, and that would have been my race recap.
Yeah, for sure.
Till mile 11.
Yeah.
Next week, we're pretty open. We might do some suggestion box, kind of how we kicked around the spear stuff last week.
Well, we're not doing the women?
We could do women. Yeah. Actually, that's not a bad idea.
You want international? Wait till we talk about the women.
Women's a little more open. Jack, do you have we had our tier 1. We all thought 5, unassailable 5.
Yeah.
Is that going to change in the women? Do you have 5? I don't want names, but do you have 5?
Top 3 are all going to be the same in any order. After that, it's a very good argument for flipping a few people around, but it's not as concrete as on the men's side. And I think there are a couple of people who are, to be honest, overrated in terms of their accomplishments. They're fantastic athletes. The fact that we're talking about them as one of the 10 greatest of all time, that just shows you how accomplished they are. But I think there are a couple of athletes whose name gets them a little bit more, prestige than their actual race results.
Uh-oh. They're going to make t-shirts about you.
Oh, yeah.
Again.
The B team.
For a little sneak peek, who's the 3? I think we all know it, but why don't you give people a little teaser?
I mean, it's got to be in some order: Lindsay, Nicole, and Susanna, right?
Yeah.
Has anyone else won a world championship in Spartan?
Manny,
those are only 3 of all time.
Amelia Cloud.
Jenny Tobin.
Jenny Tobin won a Spartan.
2011.
Oh, that's right. Down in Texas.
Down in Texas. Everyone remembers the Josiah and Hobie. And by everyone, I mean only you and I. But
yes, that is correct.
I guarantee you, Jung Young Pack and Alec Blennis remember that.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the Running Public got this week? We had 2 stellar episodes last week. I didn't listen to Danny Marino. I might. And the
first
episode.
Very hurt.
She was very informative on her.
She seems cool. She seems like a good interview. Yeah.
We have a Training Tuesday coming out, don't we, Bracken?
Oh, yeah. It goes up right after this.
And have we committed to our guest yet or no?
It's a soft commitment. We can't
always
talk
a
about
pause.
it.
Yeah,
we're looking in the ultra world. We'll just preview that most likely.
We'll say that
Julian Jornet.
this is a tough week for the Kolb family. They're remembering the passing of Ross, which is Lisa's little brother 15 years ago today. So in our world, there's a little bit less focus on work and a little more on family this past weekend and week.
For sure.
What about you, Rich? What's coming up?
I had some Mexico stuff with Torque that came out yesterday on Monday, and then we're gonna do some Savage recaps of the series, some 1 or 2 athletes who were in the top 5 and 10 in the series. So just some race recappy stuff. I'm gonna talk to Riker. He'll be on some Torque stuff. So that's what we got looking at the next week or 2.
Yep.
Sweet.
Do you want me to come up with that head-to-head that you were talking about, Kirk, for the 5 or 6 best? Just let the people chime in now once they have some numbers to look at.
Be a good social breakout.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very interesting to see if our biased opinions actually match the data.
Yeah.
I would be curious.
Definitely. Yeah.
You don't mind?
No, I'll do it.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious because maybe that'll shift my opinion because this debate is going to happen every year, it seems like. So might as well have some ammo.
Is now the time to remind everyone this is done with love.
Of course.
There's nothing personal meant by any of this. And as always, if you took it personally, use it.
Yeah.
We didn't mean it that way, but we are happy to endorse that fire.
Make
Chips
some
on
B-team
shoulders.
shirts.
Applying chips. All right, dudes. Talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.